Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
OK/X/. It's 7:30 and I'm still up for some reason. So I decided I'd go ahead and share what creepy stories I have, since I've already noped myself out of sleeping anytime soon with the creepypasta threads. So here goes. Be me around 10 years ago, 12 or 13 at the time. Lived in a swampy region in a town called Citra in Florida. Decent-sized piece of land, around 5 acres or so. Had a big field around a quarter-mile from our back door, clotheslines and stuff. Since we're poor, no dryer. One night around 10 p.m., I think. Have 2 younger brothers, at the time 9 and 10. For some reason, Mom comes out of the bedroom and calls me. "Anon, I need you and your brother to take the clothes out to the line." I argued, of course, due to the fact it was pitch black outside, and the lines weren't near the house. Mother insists, so we comply. Myself and my youngest brother, 9, head down the steps out the back door. I was carrying the clothes basket full of wet clothes, and Lil Bro had a cheap flashlight. I think it's somewhat important to mention a little bit more about our property, and try to give you a better idea of what we were dealing with. Basically, for around a quarter-mile out the back of our house were thick woods. Now, when I say thick woods, you could not see the sky, stars, and moon at all until you got out to the field. And another note, our dad used to tell us we lived on an old Indian burial ground to scare us. Maybe it was true. We did find a lot of flint and arrowheads on our property. So here we are in the pitch black under the trees heading out to the field. So on our way out to the field, flashlight starts dying. Of course. Start cursing at little brother to fix the flashlight because I can't see anything. Of course it wasn't his fault, but I was still steamed that I was even having to do this in the middle of the night. He hit it a few times and it became a little brighter and stopped flickering. Continuing out to the lines. Arrive out there and start hanging up clothes while he holds the light. Another thing relative to the story worth mentioning is that I cannot whistle to save my life. I have never been able to, and I still cannot to this day. However, my little brother was pretty good at whistling, so what happened next didn't really faze me at first. Start hearing whistling. Tune is somber, and I remember that I felt uneasy hearing it. Can't recall how it sounds today, but it was stuck in my head for a while after this. I tell my lil bro to cut out the whistling, that it's giving me the creeps. He shines the flashlight into my face and I was like, WTF. He then shines the flashlight onto his face, and he looks legitimately scared. It didn't register immediately, but I realized that he was not whistling and that it was getting louder and drawing closer. I turned to look out into the field, and with the dim glow of the flashlight, I saw the silhouette of a man around 20 to 30 yards away. I had heard some rustling in the grass, but hadn't thought much of it. We had tall grass in the field, and there were almost always rabbits running around out there. The rustling seemed to be getting faster and drawing closer. Footsteps. At this point, I just looked at my brother and said, "Run." I took off towards the house. For some reason, my dumbass brother picks up the clothes basket and tries to run with it. He was right behind me until we hit the wooded area of the property. He couldn't see the ground and he tripped on a stump. Yelled for me to wait for him. Nope, 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 kept running. I guess he caught up to me because he was right behind me when I finally hit the back door. Slam the door shut and lock it. Mom is standing there with a WTF look on her face. Tell her story, and she dismisses it, telling us we can worry about the clothes in the morning. We told our dad, and to make us feel better, he got his shotgun and brought our dog out there to the field with us. Had a pit bull at the time, was a good dog, to investigate. Walked around the area a little bit and checked it out, but didn't find anything. So he said it was probably our neighbor whistling. Only our neighbor's porch is like a half-mile from where we were. My brother remembers it as vividly as I do, and to this day, neither of us know what or who was in our field. but we both agree it was a pretty creepy situation.
Yo/X/. I don't know if there's some kind of protocol for posting this sort of stuff, but some weird things have been happening at my job. It really came to a head tonight. I'll post in Greentext as long as I can be bothered. Oh yeah, going to point out that there are some government secrets on one of the floors, so there was a 24/7 Department of Defense guard downstairs, but we never interacted much. The only time we really talked was one night he was watching TV, and I thought there were people arguing on the floor where his office was. So I might have to censor some details because of that. Be 21-year-old broke college student, take a security job, work overnights at an office building. Pretty decent job. Get to catch up on my anime backlog for most of my shift as long as I do my rounds. Fast forward 1 week, doing my rounds. Listen to the Fallout 3 soundtrack during my rounds to calm myself because I'm such a coward. Hear someone whistling along. Pause music. Whistling continues for a couple of seconds and stops. Ignore it. Assume that I'm hearing things from sleep deprivation. Still working on my sleep schedule. The next night, 9th floor. Checking the mechanical room to see if it's on fire or flooded. Hear the whistling again. Caution. Turn off music and leave the mechanical room. As I lock the door, I hear footsteps. 2 a.m. Nobody should be in the building except for me and the Department of Defense guys downstairs. Turn around, see a shadow halfway behind a cubicle. Focus my light and see the ass end of a Mexican guy with a tool belt. Yell, "Hey man, what are you doing up here?" He gets up and walks fully behind the cubicle. Run back there to chew him out. Nothing. Danger. Pick related. Run back to the stairwell and call the field training officer, basically the field supervisor off property. Tell him about the guy. He tells me to call the supervisor and then call him back. Weird. He's supposed to show up with cops, but whatever. Call the site supervisor. Asks me what color shirt the guy was wearing. It was white. Tell him. Okay, Anon, don't worry about it. I'll talk to you about it in the morning. Just don't go up there again tonight. Call the field training officer back and tell him what's up. Fast forward to the end of my shift. Supervisor shows up. Talks to me about what happened. Apparently an electrical engineer had a heart attack while doing wiring on the 9th floor. Other guards have seen it too. The company and the leasing office both know about it. Fast forward to tonight. Doing my round on the 9th floor. Hear Mexican soap operas playing in an office. Casually shit a brick and start walking toward the office. As I get closer to the office, the air gets colder. Really weird since AC is turned off at night. Inside the office. Soap opera stops. Temp inside is easily 60 degrees Fahrenheit. I live in the Murican South. That's pretty cold when you evening lows are 84 and the daily highs are 105. Super spooked at this point. Screw it, I don't get paid enough for this. Start walking back to the service elevator. Hear whistling to the tune of Civilization by Danny Kaye. Now running. Get to the service elevator, call it. Still whistling. Elevator arrives. I get the hell in it. As the door is opening, see the reflection of the guy in white shirt behind me. Don't even turn around. Run into the service elevator and frantically push the first floor button. Reach the first floor. Don't call the field training officer. Don't call my supervisor. Post on /X/ instead. I'm really glad I get to quit this job in August. This shit is getting too weird. I'm going to straight up start skipping that floor when I do my rounds from here on out.
My favorite from all Venezuelan legends would be El Silbón, the whistling man. According to the legend, the man was raised as a very spoiled boy by his parents, rich landowners of the Venezuelan llanos. One day, the boy asked his father to hunt deer for them to eat, as the deer was his favorite. The father decided to please his son and hunt a deer for him to eat. Sadly, after hours of searching, he failed to return with anything. Enraged by this, the boy took his father's hunting knife and stabbed him with it, then gutted him and ate his innards. Warned by the screams of her husband, his mother and grandfather walked in on him, covered in his father's blood and still eating the father's innards. For this, he was punished, in some accounts by his grandfather, in others by a witchman, and on others by his own mother, and cursed that he may never be able to rest, and that in punishment he was forced to carry his father's bones on his back, forever walking without being able to stop. And because of that, he still roams the plains of El Llano. His favorite victims are the drunkards. However, he isn't considered a minor spirit or a trickster. He kills anyone that crosses his path. He is regarded as an omen of death for anyone who wanders the plains at night. He would follow his victims, first from afar, until gradually catching up to them, whistling a song that follows the traditional musical scale, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Another legend states that he stops by houses at midnight and starts counting his bones. If no one dares to help him count, everyone in that house will die the following night, in revenge.
I myself grew up in a village in rural France with some weird ancient beliefs no one knows the origins of, and I followed them for years, simply because that's what I was told was the right thing. There was no human sacrifice, but plenty of unusual beliefs, traditions, and cults in the way that it's precise things you do regularly. Now that I left and been living in Acity for well over a decade and learned another culture, or I'd rather say the complete lack of a culture, and when I look back at it, it really sounds weird and wrong to some extent, but still, it's kinda okay in my mind. That's how such things propagate through the years. That's how sad life is. You're stuck within the bounds of your education, even though your education does a great job of making you believe you're free, and it's others being stuck, and it's really hard to get out of there.
I'd be fascinated to know some of the beliefs you mentioned, if you wouldn't mind discussing them.
Well, it revolved around acting appropriately depending on the will of some entity. I don't really know how to define it in English, that meddled with the things there. The last parish priest tried for years to fight against this belief, which he considered heresy, and up until the 60s he had people whipped for this, and I knew a few people that had whip marks on their backs. Once he died, he wasn't replaced. Church remained without a priest, so that belief started again, and hasn't stopped since. That entity is some kind of trickster god. It is said it came to visit some people to play around with them, influencing their actions, sometimes even possessing them, to pursue some unknown goal of his that you have to agree with or something bad would happen to you. All the little actions and rituals were to make sure you wouldn't go against his will, and he was constantly looking through eyes borrowed from people we know or animals. When my parents scolded me, they always told me, "He's looking at you," though I still wonder how I was supposed to interpret that, either because I was supposed to behave in front of him, or if he would punish me if I did bad things. I have no idea what it is supposed to look like. There is no known visual representation of it, as it can take any form. It just exists. And that's what I hated about that. I was scared of anything, thinking the slightest thing I saw could be it. It didn't even have one definite name. He was most often referred to as he. The people living there are, according to my now deceased grandmother, who knew by heart the family tree across several generations, originally all part of the same family. She also had memories of many things that had happened throughout the years, and she said that some things just kept happening and were caused by this entity. I have little memory about that myself. I was rather young when she told me that, but I have noticed plenty of these things myself. Most men have lost fingers, sometimes entirely, sometimes only a part of it. My father lost 3, 2 with a lawnmower, yeah, it happens, and another with a meat grinder. His best friend lost about 7. During his time in the army, he shot himself in the hand with a machine gun, and later on, as a carpenter, he lost a bunch of others using a buzzsaw. About all the men I met there missed fingers, though I don't know the story for the others. I myself almost lost 2 fingers after a nerve got cut, and I had those 2 paralyzed and slowly dying, and my brother lost 1 when falling in mechanical stairs, and that's one of the things my grandmother told me had been happening even before she was born. The other thing is self-terminations. There's such a high rate. They also all occur the same way. On the nearby railroad, they just wait for the next train. It's not really weird. I guess it must be common for people to self-terminate this way in areas where there are nearby railroads with no protection whatsoever. But it's still weird when 2 entire families are gone because they all committed the act, one after the other, pulverized by a train. My grandmother told me that men either lost fingers or committed self-termination, and that it's that entity that did this. And she was happy all her sons had lost fingers, and she hoped I would too. She sometimes joked around, suddenly grabbing my hand and a knife pretending she would cut my fingers, which terrified me. Though that's not entirely true. I still met men with all their fingers, though it doesn't mean they wouldn't commit self-termination later on, which kind of creeped me out even more, looking at them and knowing how they would die unless they lost fingers. So it was common practice for people who had missing fingers to grab their hand with the other when they were scared or in a risky situation, as some kind of way of saying, "See, I'm missing fingers. Nothing can happen to me." Then there are also a bunch of things my grandma knew that were surprising. She could cure many things with plants and animals. I remember my aunt once having an edema on her leg. My grandma put the heart of a snail along with something else I can't remember. I think it was salt, and it supposedly solved the problem. I still remember how even for me, used to seeing those things, it looked alien. And my father was acting like it simply was common knowledge and very down to earth, simply told me that it was just some folkloric science and that real scientists would eventually come to the same conclusion. There are many more things she did, but I have no recollection of what she precisely did nor why. I just have bits here and there. I should work on it one day, maybe I could recall more than that. As for rituals, they included plenty little things like eating a piece of bread and rotating clockwise on your right foot before going on a trip, which I did every weekend when I rode my bike, only watering flowers at night, putting silver coins in butter, never looking down a well because the death is down there and would grab you, never whistling in the evening, always exchanging a blade for coin so if someone offers you a knife, you still have to buy it from him. Plenty stuff I barely can define for it feels so natural. I don't even notice it's not normal. And then I have plenty loose stories of plenty stuff about pregnant women, some 14-year-old kid who handled a farm and took care of his whole family all alone, and did so for 30 years. Underground tunnels under the village dating back to the Dark Ages and related to those beliefs, which means they're really old. But all of this just sounded like the right thing to do back then.
That's some crazy shit, man. I've never heard of anything like that outside fiction before. I suppose the pagan cultural heritage of Europe runs deep.
It's really not unusual. Well, in this place, it's a bit above the rest, but still there are similar things in plenty of places. It's just things that go undocumented, partly because it simply feels normal to people there, on the same level as wiping your ass in the toilet, so no one bothers thinking more about it. And even if they realize the full extent of what they do, they'd rather hate on those that are different from them than somehow document that. And there's that stuff all across Europe. As long as you go deep enough into the backcountry, you'll run into places with local superstitions and beliefs. I know it sounds surprising to Americans usually who aren't used to cultures dating back to several centuries. I mean, there's a Celtic cemetery down my street in front of which I walk every day. And there are a couple old stones from a former wall in my front yard that are dated to 1554. And I just put flower pots on them. That's how common old stuff is, and old beliefs survived the same way. And even then, that's a small time compared with some of the stuff I saw in places in Asia and Africa, like people who revere 3,000-year-old statues and stuff.
/x/I need your professional opinion on this. Since it is popular, I'll use Greentext. Be me. I live in Austria and like hunting. Last year I planned a hunting trip to an unspecified location in the Austrian Alps. I pack everything up and jump into the car. My rifle is an old Steyr M95. This will be relevant later. I have a prime hunting location. It is a steep rock face overlooking a clearing in a valley between two nice-looking mountains. There are a few small cracks in the stone at the bottom. After the first day, I build up my tent, make a campfire, and drink a beer. I drift off to sleep. Sometime around midnight, I get awoken by an indescribable stench. It smelt like a dead animal was pressed out and then its juices were sprayed across my camp. Since I am quite paranoid from lurking on /x/ I take out my rifle. I hear some noises in the bushes. The bush rustled and I stabbed into it with my bayonet. A snake tail disappears into one of the cracks at the bottom. Relieved, I went back. The snake must have killed something. I tried to rationalize. Not even back to sleep for an hour before a loud whistling sound tore me out of my sleep. I took the rifle and again stormed out of my camp. My jaw dropped as I saw some creature. It looked like a snake with 2 legs in the front of its body, and a head looking like a mixture between a cat and a lizard. I tried to chamber a round, but it didn't work. Since the gun is so old, almost none of the caliber it is chambered in is available, so I manually put handmade rounds into the old casings. One of them seemed to have been deformed. I fumbled with my rifle, while the creature released another sound. Finally, I got another round in the chamber. The creature lunged at me, and I fired. I missed it, and it hit me. The creature was about 5 feet, 1.5 meters long, and surprisingly strong. It wrestled me to the ground, and I dropped the rifle. It bit my arm with its viper-like fangs. Thankfully, I wore a thick coat that it couldn't penetrate. I realized the stench was emanating from the creature. I almost passed out from this disgusting smell. The creature was screeching loudly as it grabbed onto my arm and prepared to bite again. With my other arm, I got a hold of the bayonet that had dislodged from the barrel as the gun fell. I slashed at it. The creature screamed loudly and then escaped back into the cave. The blood stank even worse than the creature. I took the rifle and fired the entire clip into the hole, then took everything and hauled ass back to my car. Any idea what it was? I checked and couldn't find any animal comparable to this.
Bro, that sounds like Tatzelwurm. Everything fits the description. The Tatzelwurm is a lizard-like creature, often described as having the face of a cat, with a serpent-like body which may be slender or stubby, with 4 short legs or 2 forelegs and no hind legs.
This is sort of a ghost story, and sort of just a really creepy incident without a good explanation. Sometime during 1992, my father's company did a promotional campaign to celebrate opening new offices in southern Georgia, USA. They sent each employee a special greeting card featuring Southern images, such as a Confederate flag, Civil War images, etc. The card read, "Now opening offices in the heart of Dixie." For the benefit of those who live outside of the U.S., Dixie is a term that is often used to describe the southern states that seceded from the Union during the Civil War or war between the states. The card had a mechanism inside to allow it to play a tune when opened. This card was programmed to play a tune called "I Wish I Was in Dixie" or Dixie. If you have never heard it, you can find a version on Wikipedia under Dixie. If you are familiar with these types of cards, you will know that they only play when opened. When opened, the left-hand side of the card pulls a tab on the right-hand side which connects the battery to the speaker to play the tune. If the card is shut, the tab can't complete the connection, so the card can't play, no power, no tune. My little brother loved this card and claimed it as his own. Musical cards were a novelty back then, so it was no surprise when the card was eventually forgotten about by the rest of the family. About a year after the card arrived in the house, we were all awakened in the middle of the night by the sound of Dixie. It was very creepy to wake up to mysterious music and not know the source. My brother then remembered the card and we realized it was probably the cause of the music. We searched the house, but the music stopped before we could find the source. Off and on over a period of 2 to 3 months, the music led us on a search of the house. It played long enough to get our attention and get us out of bed looking for it, but not to locate it. The night we finally found the card, it was underneath the seat cushion of a wingback chair in the family room. It was playing loudly and closed as it played. It stopped playing when my mother picked it up. When she opened it, it would not play at all. It did not seem to be damaged, and there was no reason for it to play when closed. My mother put the card away in her desk drawer and still has it to this day. It has not played since that night. It was a curious and creepy event, especially since there was a bit of neighborhood controversy going on at the time. A development company had just purchased a large parcel of land nearby and planned to build a shopping center on it. The land at the time contained the ruins of the trenches and battlements built to fight the Union Army and keep them from entering Richmond. Maybe the spirits were upset by the construction as it destroyed the trenches and battlements they worked so hard to build.
So I'm sitting downstairs in my house, just about to go up to bed. Everyone else is upstairs, and I hear this very distinctive tune coming from the kitchen. I was naturally freaked out by this at first, but me, wanting to just rationalize everything, I merely said it was the wind, or my brother whistling upstairs, even though that would hardly make sense, as I was sure I had heard it coming from the kitchen. So I go upstairs, and I don't really think any of it, and I'm sitting in my room. It's about 11:30 now, and it began again. This very distinctive whistle, like a song or a tune. So now, I'm sure this is my brother, so I went to tell him to quit with the whistling, as it was becoming annoying. But to my shock, he was asleep. So I go back to my room a little freaked out, and when the whistling begins again this time, I actually start shaking. Literally everyone in the house is asleep, and there's no way it could have been my parents. Their room is on the other side of the house, and it sounded as if this whistle was coming from outside my room. This continued to happen for 10 minutes, so I plucked up some courage, went downstairs, checked all of the appliances, the TV, the oven, etc. I wanted some way of finding a logical explanation, but I just couldn't find one. As I was downstairs, the worst part is that the whistling sound was now coming from the living room. It's as if this sound was following me around the house. If I was freaked out, before I was now shitting, scared. I ran upstairs, put my earphones in, and tried to sleep. The next day, my mother said it was probably just the wind, and granted it was a rainy, windy night, but this whistle was so loud, and it was a distinctive tune. What the tune was, I've no idea, but there's no way that was the wind. I'm convinced that it was something paranormal. What was strange was that I've been in this house for 13 of my 16 years living, and nothing like this has ever happened.
Not much of a story, but here it goes. Be me. Wanting to reconnect with my best friend after he got a job as a roadie. We'll call him R. Bring along a mutual friend who is a huge /K/ kind of guy. We will call this guy K. We all happen to have a 4-day weekend ahead of us due to Labor Day, plan 4-day camping trip to Jack's River. Pack up Friday night and head out by midnight. After hunting down a decent campsite for 2 hours, we set up. As we're setting up, we keep smelling this musty old wet dog smell and think nothing of it because we're Innawoods doing stupid shit hanging out. After me and R chop up a decent 1.5-foot diameter log, we hear something moving in the brush. Moving our lights over the area, we see nothing and drag the pieces of wood back and keep an eye out for anything. Pretty hard since it's pitch black out. Get the fire going and cook up a hobo slop of baked beans and ground beef with a shot of Evan Williams for flavor. The smell gets stronger and we shine our lights to the tree line once more. Nothing. Dead quiet. No animals, no wind, nothing. We ignore it and continue eating and drinking and tossing cheers, jokes, and toasts. Then a loud piercing whistling happens, literally so loud it echoes. A campover yells at us to keep it down. They're about half a football field away. Whistling continues in short bursts with long pauses in between it. K has his Glock on him. I'm carrying my AR-15 because it's a new sight and I'm wanting to show it off. R has the skillet. Dude from other camp has stormed over and is yelling at us and then sees we're staring into the tree line and realizes we aren't doing it. He asks us what's going on and we say we don't know. It just happened. After a short talk, he goes back to his camp and we watch him because we're weirded out now and know how horror movies work. Dude crawls back into his camper or whatever and we make a cat hole and bury the small cooler we have and burn our garbage. Setting up in the tent, we begin to fall asleep, and each time me and R do, the smell of musky wet dog gets stronger and we hear the pat, 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 pat of something semi-circling our tent. Me and R get no sleep. K is out like a light with a blind man. As dawn comes, so do bees. A massive amount of bees in yellow jackets like someone casted insects swarm from 3.5. We wake K and tell him we have to pack up. As we step outside, the bugs are everywhere and riled up, stinging us here and there. We pack everything up and head to the lake to wash and lick our wounds of stings. K checks the equipment and nothing is missing. R is with me and we are tending to the stingers that we got stuck with, which was about 4 or 5 between the two of us. We traveled another hour towards the top of the mountain and set up camp. Me and R are beat and irritable. We chop wood while K makes food, and we snap at each other here and there. After eating and it being about noon, we decide to try and get to sleep. K digs the cat hole again and puts the cooler in with a rock on top. R and I slap onto the ground of the tent and pass out after K easily goes back to sleep, the asshole. Waking up about 4 hours later to hearing R cussing, and I assume pissed about something, I come out to see the cooler dug up, the meat strewn everywhere and the beans smashed. We wake up K and he comes out to the scene and is stumped. We see the hole. It's a solid 2 or 3 feet deep and tore clean open along with the cooler and its contents. Camping trip cut short, it seems. We take a jug and set out for a nearby spring. So fresh.af. We fill the gallon jug about halfway and wash off a bit. As we do, we hear the goddamn whistling again and smell the mangy, musty smell of wet dog again. It's daylight, we see nothing, not a damn thing. We head back to camp, keeping our heads on a swivel, seeing nothing along the way. We reach camp and clean up the mess which has attracted flies. No whistling, no dog smell, just silence. We decide to pack up the tent and just sit and smoke our pipes, chop wood, and crack out the speaker and play some Dead South native howl shit like that. Still no wildlife noise. Being an avid /x/browser, whatever the hell you call it, I give R&K the heads up that quiet woods means dangerous woods. Nightfall hits and we are just enjoying the rest of the Evan Williams, not much left but enough to enjoy. Like clockwork, the smell is back and it is strong. We hear the disorganized pat, 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 pat. Eyes forward. Avi. We feel like we're about to be fucked. We park the trucks in the 2 exits to prevent people coming in, guns up and ready and flashlights everywhere. We don't see a goddamn thing and feel like we are going insane. R then points to a large dusty brown dog. This beast reeks and looks like the mange scabies and birthed an eldritch epidermal horror. No heroics here. PNG. This thing is as tall as the truck R drives window, probably a good 4 feet on all fours. Like all Greentexts, this thing looks wrong. Humanoid limbs, patchy dirty fur, snarling and beady eyes. The smell damn near chokes us, it's so rancid. K fires a pot shot and the thing honestly flinches and snarls, keeping a deadlock look on us. K and I are apparently on the same wavelength as we let 2 shots rip. My dumbass misses or skinned it cause R now has a hole in the driver's side door. Sorry R, casualties. Either both shots or K's shot connecting made this beast howl, an ungodly howl making our ears ring. K, being the man and the hero, just unloads, and it's evident he doesn't aim well. After the howl and gunfire, even with the shit earplugs, our ears are slightly ringing and this thing has ran off. That's it, boys, time to leave. We throw everything in the back of the trucks and haul ass out of there, not stopping once until we reach the closest Waffle House to let our adrenaline settle and ears recover.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentexts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check the Odyssey and Rumble pages for separate archives of previous broadcasts.